Church here, and welcome to the Game Grinder. And this is going to be another recent pickups video, and this is actually take two because the first time I recorded this I must have bumped my microphone and didn't notice that the cord must have came unplugged, and about halfway through there was no audio, so that is kind of a drag. But hey, hopefully this time the video can go a little bit better, because I was kind of like iffy about how that one turned out. But yeah, so as always, these are some recent pickups, obviously, but it's a little staggered behind, just so I can keep, you know, kind of about the same amount of time for each video, instead of just showing off like one or two games. Just gives me a little bit more to talk about, you know, a little bit more substance, as it were. So I guess without further ado then, let's get started. So the first batch of games here is going to be what I'd consider friends hookups. A couple friends gave me some pretty good deals on some games, so that is awesome and always appreciated. And the first game here is Conquest of the Crystal Palace for the NES. I've never actually had the opportunity to play this game. I know all about it, I've seen plenty of videos. I know that it's a pretty tough game, but I always thought it looked really cool, and you know, getting a good deal on it is always a great thing. So the next game here is Super Street Fighter 2 for the Super Nintendo. Of course, Street Fighter on the SNES is where it's at and the bee's knees, but a lot of people think Street Fighter 2 is kind of like the Street Fighter game, which, you know, I totally agree with that, but I actually really like Super Street Fighter 2 as well. I like the added characters and just slightly more streamlined, I guess, compared to how Street Fighter 2 was. But I also have the Genesis version of that, which is neat. But so the next game here is kind of an interesting one. So it's StarCraft 64. Obviously StarCraft on the Nintendo 64. So StarCraft is kind of a legendary RTS game. Fantastic series. Pretty much, you know, anything, I know I always say this, anything Blizzard makes, like, I typically love, and it's very much true. If you haven't played StarCraft, I would highly encourage it. Not this version, mind you, but play the PC version. Pretty much any computer these days can play StarCraft. It came out in like 99, 98. I don't remember exactly when, but it's an older game, but it's just an absolutely fantastic game. And I actually reviewed the StarCraft 2 trilogy. The last game was released, and I recently reviewed that, so if you haven't seen that, definitely encourage you to check it out. But, you know, it is what it is. It's StarCraft on the 64. You know, it's not a terrible port by any means, but, you know, pretty much you should just play the PC version because it's that much better. So then another game here is something I actually had no idea existed. Derek Alexander, who has this channel, Stop Skeletons for Fighting. He used to be the Happy Video Game Nerd. I can't remember for some reason what his name was before he changed his channel name to Stop Skeletons for Fighting. But he's doing this really cool series where he talks about kind of some hidden gems. You know, I know that word's used a lot these days, but he shows off some games that aren't maybe normally talked about too much. And he did a great Game Boy Color episode, talked about some cool looking games, and kind of blew my mind that this existed. So this kind of ties in with some recent excitement of mine. But anyways, the game is Dragon's Lair for the Game Boy Color. So if you don't know what Dragon's Lair is, originally it was an arcade game, and basically what it is it's a animated movie that has QuickTime events throughout. So basically you play through this animated short, and at certain times you got to do certain directions or button presses and whatnot, otherwise you die, and there's always all these death scenes and whatnot. But really cool game. The animation's fantastic. It's done by Don Bluth Productions, who also did Secret of Nim, All Dogs Go to Heaven, Land Before Time, and just really cool games. I've always had an extreme fascination with them just because I love the art style. I know they're not the greatest games in the world, and you know, they're barely even games as is, but just really cool. And the funny thing is the Game Boy Color version is actually true to the original. So basically it is Dragon's Lair, but on the Game Boy Color, done in, you know, 16-bit. I don't know how many bits Game Boy Color is actually, but done in that style, but it's the full game, unlike the NES version of the game, which is a pile of crap, honestly. But yeah, I thought that was really neat. So as soon as I found out about it, I was like, boom, I went online and found it. I've actually been particularly excited about Dragon's Lair lately because Don Bluth's and his production studio is currently trying to pitch a feature-length Dragon's Lair film. He's trying to get the funding for it. He did a crowdfunding for making a proof of concept or a trailer to pitch to studios, just because traditional hand-drawn animation is quite expensive, and his style is, very high quality compared to a lot of other stuff. So, yeah, and just really excited, and I really hope things are successful with that. And yeah, it's just great to have more Don Bluth in another shape or form in my collection. So then the last few things here. Now, I actually had these games cartridge only, but my friend gave me a great deal on some boxes and manuals, which completed 2 games that I am a huge fan of. And this is the first one here is Secret of Evermore. So I had the cartridge, but now I got the case and manual. One of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo. Absolutely love Secret of Evermore. I mean, pretty much anything Squaresoft did on the Super Nintendo, as far as I'm concerned, is gold. But then the other one here is Secret of Mana for the Super Nintendo. I already had the cartridge and the manual for this, but I bought the box and manual for my friend, so now I have another manual for trade bait or whatever. But yeah, it's just really great to have 2 of my favorite games complete, especially because typically these are relatively expensive games to get in their complete form. And I got them for good prices before, just cartridges, and I don't really care about the value and whatnot, but it's just awesome to have those games complete anyways. So then moving on to a few things that I've actually done some videos on recently, mostly unboxing videos. I'm just going to kind of gloss over these games real quick, and you can definitely go and check out the unboxing videos to learn more about them. But in no particular order here, I'm going to start with Lara Croft and the Temple of Osiris, which is the second digital-only Tomb Raider game. They're more isometric co-op games than the standard Tomb Raider formula. And this is actually a physical edition that actually doesn't come with the game, because the game itself is still only digital and comes with some little goodies. And like I said, I did a video for this, so if you'd like to check it out, I would encourage you to do so. So then another digital-only release that just got a physical release is Republic. And this is the PS4, basically, not an HD remaster, but I believe it is enhanced a little bit. Originally, it was released on digital platforms, and they did a physical release PS4 with a collector's edition, contraband edition, which I thought was really neat. A really cool looking stealth action adventure game that I am pretty stoked to play, but with my backlog, of course, who knows when I will get to it. And then another game that was digital only for a while and now has a physical release is Life is Strange, and this is the PC version. And yeah, just really great game. I haven't played it yet. I know all about it, and I hope to play this one soon. But who knows what's going to happen with the games coming out in the next month, Doom and Overwatch, especially Overwatch. I think I'm going to be putting some time into that. So unfortunately, I think some of these games I was going to be playing recently are going to be pushed back a little bit, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, Life is Strange physical edition is great. And then another was going to be a digital only release, but I also got a very limited physical release, was a PSP game called Summon Night 5, and this is the limited edition, and it actually comes with a soundtrack and game for the PSP. Looked pretty cool. I liked kind of what they were selling here, and it was a pretty good price, so I decided to pick that up. I definitely need to spend a lot of time with my PSP. I haven't barely played much of my mobile stuff, or handheld stuff, I mean, unfortunately, but I'll get there eventually. Many years to go here, so we'll see what happens. And then another video that I did recently was the unboxing for Witch and the 100 Night Revival Edition, which is an HD remaster of the PlayStation 3 game. And this came with, a little limited edition deal, which, of course, I'm always a sucker for. And it also came with a little kind of like chibi figure of the main character. So that was pretty cool. And then continuing on with a couple other recent videos that I did, but recent pickups as well, is going to be the Hotline Miami Gamers Edition. Definitely, if you don't know anything about this, definitely check out the video, especially if you have interest in Hotline Miami, because this is pretty cool. Basically, it comes with a physical copy of Hotline Miami 1 and 2, comes with a DVD with the game trailers, a comic book, a cassette tape with selected works from the soundtracks, and again, these were digital-only games, awesome games. I love these games, and it was a huge bummer that they didn't have a physical release, and the more they do this with a lot of these games that I really enjoy, the better, because, I mean, it's great to be able to have something to remind me about the game, like when I'm browsing my shelf, like, yeah, that is an awesome game. Whereas the digital games, I can look at my computer, but, I mean, I know what games I have installed and what games I have on Steam and whatnot, but, you just can't appreciate them as much as having the physical versions of it. And, of course, I like my collector's editions. And speaking of collector's editions, this one was pretty neat, and that was the Dark Souls 2 collector's edition. Some guy had a ton of these that he was selling on eBay for like 20 bucks, and I was like, yeah, hell yeah, $20 for a collector's edition. And like I said in the video, and this is a series that I've never really played. I've always heard great things, but I was just never sold on them, really. Like, I kind of knew what to expect going into it, but then again, I didn't know what to expect. And with that, and with all the hype recently with Dark Souls 3, I finally gave in, picked up Dark Souls 3, and just went with it. And I gotta say, people do a crap job of reviewing these games, because, like, it way exceeded my expectations. Like, holy crap, is Dark Souls amazing. Like, why didn't anybody tell me before, is kind of the line I've been going with, because yeah, it's so great, and I really want to try to get to Dark Souls 1 and 2, but, with, like I said, with Overwatch and Doom coming out, all my games are getting pushed back a little while, so who knows, but I'm really excited to play through the other From Software games, because Dark Souls 3 was really, really awesome. So yeah, so then kind of moving on to a few other random things that I got recently. So with me, I've talked about it before in a few different places, but a couple months ago I played through Valkyrie Profile for the first time, which was a great game. And with that, it was a game I was really excited to play. So once I started playing it, found out that, hey, yeah, it is pretty awesome. I decided to pick up other versions of the game. So a friend had given me a loose copy of Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, but I went ahead and got a case and manual for that, so I now have a complete copy of Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, which is basically just, it's a PSP version. Nothing's been changed, same game, but, for the price that I got it for, yeah, totally. And then with that, I also picked up Valkyrie Profile 2 Silmeria, which is obviously the PS2 sequel. The style looks a lot different, kind of unfortunately, because one of the things that I really loved about Valkyrie Profile was a lot of the pixel art and sprite work with the characters, but I'm sure this game will be pretty cool as well, just bearing in the fact that the first one was as good as it was. So then a few random PS2 games. So recently I talked about how I was getting interested in the Onimusha series, a series that I've never played for whatever reason, and I recently picked up Onimusha 1, and now I have Onimusha 2, Samurai's Destiny. Again, these are kind of like made by the same studio that did Resident Evil games, the original Resident Evil games. It still kind of has that isometric third-person action-adventure game, but it's not like zombies and stuff. It's, feudal Japan stuff. But yeah, so eventually I'll get the third game as well, but I'm not quite there yet. Just haven't found it for the right price. And then also recently a friend and I were talking about the Tomb Raider series and how I was closing in on a complete Tomb Raider collection pretty much. Love the series. For the most part, it does no wrong in my eyes. Pretty much every game is excellent. There's a couple there that aren't the best, but I was talking about how I'm still needing Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is getting a PS4 release later this year, which I will get that then, which I'm really anticipating because, yeah, the reboot was great. But during our conversation, I realized I didn't have Tomb Raider Legend for some reason. I had this game, and I don't know what happened to it. It's the weirdest thing. So I went ahead and picked up Tomb Raider Legend. So now I'm just missing Rise of the Tomb Raider and a couple handheld Tomb Raider games. I believe one is for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, I think, if I remember correctly. Just, you know, because of the handheld market, I'm not super versed in a lot of the, like, Game Boy Advanced stuff. So, like Dragon's Lair, like, I'm very surprised when I find out about some of these games. And there's definitely some like Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance games I really, really want to add to my collection. But anyways, another kind of just random game. So in the early 2000s, when I first bought my first factory computer, and then a few years later when I built my first computer, I was pretty much like just PC games. Like many years there, I was pretty much only playing PC games, a lot of online games, a lot of multiplayer games and whatnot. But there was a lot of random single player games I was playing, and unfortunately at the time, just because the financial situation that I was in, I couldn't afford games. So unfortunately with that, then I of course pirated games, and I was kind of thinking about some of these games I used to play that I really enjoyed that I was missing from my collection that I'd like to re-add. So I started looking up some things, and I actually came across a sealed copy of Velvet Assassin, which is not a great game by any means, but a game that I actually really enjoyed. It's basically a stealth action-adventure game set in World War II. The main character is actually based off of a real-life female assassin that operated during World War II. And I don't know, I like the game, I like the story, I like the visuals. Just stealth games are very comfortable for me. I really enjoy them. I like the stealth aspect and being kind of tedious and meticulous with dispatching of enemies and stuff. And if you've never heard of this game, I really encourage you to check it out. I think it does have console ports of it as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but really recommend looking into this one, especially if you're a fan of stealth games. And then a couple PS3 games here. So the first one is going to be DuckTales Remastered. This is basically a HD version of the original Nintendo DuckTales, but like all the art's been redone. Gameplay is still there, pretty much what it was, and really kind of a fun fact, and I like to bring this up every chance I can, anytime I can promote this other game. But DuckTales was actually, the remaster anyways, was developed by WaveForward Technologies, who also did the Shantae series. And they also did the Double Dragon Neon remaster. And another cool thing about it is Jake Kaufman, who did the remaster of the DuckTales soundtrack, also did the remaster of the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack. He also did the soundtracks for the Shantae games, which I love. And as an added bonus, he also did the soundtrack for Shovel Knight, which many of you know is an awesome soundtrack, because I know a lot of people have really enjoyed Shovel Knight. And yeah, anytime I can throw that information out there is great, because yeah, I'm a huge Shantae fanboy at this point, and I think more people need to check out those games, because the community is really missing out on some fantastic games. So a couple other, I guess, final things here. So another thing that a friend hooked me up with was a butt ton of dust covers. So I had 2 big plastic bags of Super Nintendo and Nintendo dust covers. There's about, I think it was like almost half and half, like 30 or so of each. Most of the Nintendo ones did have the Nintendo branding on them. This one doesn't, but whatever. So that's cool. So all my Super Nintendo games now have dust covers on them, and I'm still missing a few for my Nintendo, but you know, you can never have enough dust covers, so that is awesome. And then the last thing here, I almost forgot about because I had to set it to the side because it takes up a lot of room, But this first thing doesn't take up a lot of room, but it is Sonic CD for the Sega CD. Unfortunately, it's just the game, but hey, it's a great game. Hopefully someday I can get a case and manual for this. But of course, with that, I also recently acquired a Sega CD. So this is, of course, the attachment for the Sega Genesis that played the disc-based Sega CD games. And I've always wanted a Sega CD ever since it was released. I remember I had EGM magazine, and there was ads for the Sega CD showing games like Snatcher, and I've just, ever since it was released, I've always wanted a Sega CD, but of course, once I started collecting again, the prices were not what I was willing to pay, pretty much, and I ended up getting a pretty good deal on this. Came with all the cords, works, and you know, it's in pretty good shape, so that is great. I already had the Model 2 Genesis, but I just needed the attachment, so I now have a Sega CD, and real soon here I am planning on getting a Snatcher reproduction, probably, just because I will never be able to afford Snatcher, which is a game I've always really wanted to play. And it's funny how that works, is because when I saw the ads for Snatcher, I was like, oh, this game looks really awesome. And then, you know, years later, we get the Metal Gear Solid series, which is directed by the same guy, created by the same guy, Hideo Kojima. And I just found it was interesting that this game that I didn't really know much about, turns out later was made by, you know, one of my favorite game designers. And I know it's a really great game, and it's basically a sort of point-and-click adventure, visual novel style, like sci-fi noir game, but it's really expensive, and I don't think I'll ever be able to afford that unless I magically stumble across one on a garage sale, but I doubt that's ever going to happen. So yeah, hopefully I can, you know, get some more time spent in with the Sega CD. I have only Sonic CD right now, but there's a lot of games I'd really like to get for the Sega CD, but they're pretty expensive, unfortunately. So yeah, so I think that is going to about do it for this pickup video. Of course, as always, I'd be interested to know your thoughts on some of these games, and yeah, so I guess with that said, then thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time on the Game Grinder.